Hello there, everyone. My name is Jimmy Mack, and welcome back to the 7th academic podcast. This is going to be the NS1 textbook, Unit 5, Chapter 9, Drug Awareness. Now, a drug is anything that alters the way you or your body behaves. And there are three different terms for how you can take drugs: use, misuse, and abuse. And they might sound like the same thing, but they're actually very different definitions. Drug use is just taking any kind of drug. That's not necessarily bad. Like if you're taking headache medicine in order to get rid of a headache, that's perfectly fine. Drug misuse is when you're taking a legal drug in order to solve a medical issue, but you're not taking it in the right way. So, for example, if you're taking that headache medicine, but you're taking double the amount of pills recommended, that would be drug misuse. And of course, drug abuse is using it for reasons that are non-medical, and you're using it improperly or excessively. Most drugs are controlled substances, which are substances whose possession, sale, or manufacture is regulated in some way by law. In addition, most drugs can be addictive, which means forming a physical or psychological dependence on that substance. Now, the most important drug to know about, as well as the most widely consumed and abused in the United States, is alcohol. It's legal for those 21 and older to drink it, and it's considered socially acceptable to do so in moderation, but it can form addiction, and it is the #1 cause of death among high school students. Well, I say alcohol is the #1 cause of death. Drinking and driving is the #1 cause of death. But, that's still primarily an alcohol problem. Anyway, alcohol is made when sugar and yeast react and ferment. Some of them are distilled, others are just fermented, and then that's it. Now, a lot of people don't actually realize that alcohol is a drug. Because of that, as well as because of its social acceptability, it can be called a gateway drug, which means that it can lead to the use and abuse of more dangerous drugs in the future. Alcohol and tobacco are the two main gateway drugs. Now, over long periods of time, alcohol can have a whole bunch of long-term effects. Those can be tolerance to it, or dependence on it, which is a really bad form of addiction, brain damage, digestive problems, liver damage, heart disease, and fetal alcohol syndrome. In the short term, it will affect your bloodstream, it will mess with your brain, it'll kill your liver pretty fast, it'll ruin your kidneys, it can make you super thirsty because of that. Because it impairs your brain functionality, it can result in motor vehicle crashes, and it can synergize with other drugs that you take at the same time to produce effects that are many times worse. Some people, when they drink alcohol, can't control it. They're called alcoholics. We don't actually know why some people are alcoholics and some people aren't. There looks to be like a genetic component, but anyone who drinks alcohol is at risk of becoming an alcoholic. Another drug that gets talked about a lot is marijuana, which comes from the dried flowers, leaves, and stems of the cannabis plant. It's smoked in cigarettes called joints and also sometimes in pipes. It is currently illegal in the US, although it is being legalized a lot at the state level. It's still not actually legal. The federal government just isn't enforcing those laws. Its active ingredient is tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, and it produces psychoactive effects that alters your mind. It distorts your senses, including hearing, taste, touch, and smell, and can alter your sense of time and place, as well as mess with your emotions. Because cannabis has been around for a while and it's widely abused today, there's a common myth that it doesn't actually pose you any threat, but it definitely can. It's got a whole bunch of effects, including short-term memory loss and a shortened attention span, an increased heart rate and irregular heartbeat, weakening of the immune system, reduced hormone levels, development of amotivational syndrome, which is kind of depressing. You get a whole bunch of apathy and loss of ambition. You get impaired judgment, unsteadiness, lack of coordination, slowed responses, lung damage, and lung cancer from the fact that you have to smoke it. You've got depression and moodiness that you can get. You've got intense fear and anxiety, or you can develop a tolerance. In fact, if you develop a tolerance as well as that sort of depression and moodiness, you can start to require marijuana in order to feel better, and that is called psychological dependency. So it does have a whole bunch of negative effects associated with it. There's also the cocaine family. Cocaine is a stimulant that comes from the leaves of the coca bush, and it's very bad for you. Its full chemical formula is cocaine hydrochloride. It's got some derivatives. There's crack cocaine, which is street cocaine that you process using boiling water and baking soda. It can lead to a very pure cocaine that is like way more dangerous than cocaine hydrochloride, so crack is pretty terrible. You've also got bazooka, which is another form of cocaine that is pretty similar to crack in how it works. Crack is often smoked, or you can snort cocaine as a powder. In addition, they can be injected. Similar to cocaine, another stimulant is amphetamines. These are also very bad for you. A very close relative of amphetamines is methamphetamine, or just meth. Amphetamines are also known as speed. Barbiturates are prescription drugs that are depressants. When they're abused, they produce alcohol-like syndromes, but they can be much more severe. They can cause serious fatigue. They can make you extremely depressed and tired and hopeless, and often actually drive abusers to suicide because of that. Methylqualone is a similar depressant, except it has been banned for production in the U.S. Since 1984 because it was widely misused and there was pretty much no medical value to it. It has similar effects to barbiturates. Using methylqualone with alcohol has a special name. It's called lewding out, and it can literally kill you. The textbook does not elaborate, it just says it can cause death. And the third depressant on our list, we've got tranquilizers. These are used medically to treat anxiety, insomnia, and convulsions, but you can become dependent on them, and just like methylqualone, when you mix them with alcohol, they can kill you. All three of those depressants that I mentioned, tranquilizers, methylqualone, and barbiturates, are taken in the form of tablets or capsules, like pills. Next up, we've got narcotics. These are drugs used medically to relieve pain, produce sleep, and dull your senses. Most of these are opiates, which come from the seed pods of opium poppies. So first up in this category, we've got opium, which is clearly an opiate. Codeine, also an opiate. We've got morphine, another opiate. We've got methadone, and the worst form of narcotic, which is heroin. This is a concentrated form of morphine. And it is one of the only ones on this list that is illegal to use even medically. However, it is the most abused narcotic, and it's on the rise. You start off by usually sniffing or smoking it in powdered form, but as you become addicted to it, you want to mainline, which is injecting it into your veins in order to intensify its effects. This gives you a massive high for like 12 to 16 hours where you are basically in a stupor. You don't have tensions, fears, worries, hunger, thirst. But then after that, you experience severe withdrawal, which is just pretty much everything you can think of that sucks, that happens. And in order to get that to go away, you need to take another dose of heroin. So it's really easy to get heavily addicted. And oftentimes, if you get addicted, you're going to die really young. It's terrible for you. The next category to cover is hallucinogens, which alter your physical senses, producing a whole bunch of sensations that aren't real and messing with your ideas of space and time. The first one of these, and the most common, is LSD, lysergic acid dithylamide, and I know that those three words don't actually have the acronym LSD, just accept it. It's also known as acid, and you take it in brightly colored tablets, imprinted blotter paper, thin squares of gelatin, or as a clear liquid. It's a super powerful hallucinogen. It will just make you hallucinate all sorts of visions, sights, sounds for hours. Some people think they're exciting, some people think they're nightmarish. And if you're having a bad trip, you can do dangerous, irrational things in order to get out of it. It's pretty wild. If you overdose, it can result in psychosis, accidental death, or suicide. Next up on the list of hallucinogens, we've got PCP, or phencyclidine hydrochloride. This is actually the only hallucinogen with a medical use. It's used as an animal tranquilizer. It can be in a liquid, capsules, white powder, or just as pills. It interrupts the functions of your neocortex, which controls your intellect and keeps your instincts in check. So basically, it just disconnects your rational thought from what you're doing. Sometimes you can feel drunk, sometimes you can feel depressed, paranoid, you can hallucinate, and everything. You just kind of get messed with. If you abuse it, you can get seizures, you can fall into a coma, you can die, or you can just do violent, unpredictable behavior because, like I said, your instincts and your impulses are no longer as much in check. Some of the abuses have committed murder or suicide under the influence. The other two hallucinogens to know about are psilocybin, which is the hallucinogen found in mushrooms, and mescaline, which is produced in a type of cactus. The next type of drug are inhalants, which are toxic chemicals from pretty much anything like glue, nail polish, spray paint, paint thinner, gasoline, that you huff or which is spraying into a cloth and holding it over your nose, or you can sniff it from a bag, bottle, or can in order to get a brief, mild euphoria. All of these products contain warnings against inhaling their fumes because they're hazardous. They can develop cancer, although a lot of their effects are unpredictable and depend on what the chemicals are inside the inhalants. Next up, we've got ecstasy. This is a chemically engineered designer drug that is very much like cocaine. In its extreme cases, it can result in seizure and death when you abuse it. Another drug that you need to be aware of is Rofinol. This is also known as roofies or the date rape pill because it's commonly used in order to drug someone's drink in order to commit a date rape, both because it puts them in a stupor at the time and afterwards they will struggle to remember what happened, so it will help you get away with it. It is often used in pills, and it's used for date rape, so that is why it is significant in terms of that. Next up are steroids. Anabolic steroids are really only available by prescription, but any other steroids and steroid supplements can be available over the counter, and they're available under many names. They're often taken in order to increase your performance in sports. If you're abusing them, you can take many times the recommended dosages in an effort to bulk up, and it can lead to withdrawal syndrome and permanent bodily damage, also chemical dependence. And finally, we have tobacco. Tobacco is commonly called a gateway drug because it's considered socially acceptable but can lead the way to addictions to worse and more dangerous types of drugs. Its hazards are cancer and other diseases. It can also affect others through secondhand smoke. It can be smoked in cigarettes, pipes, or cigars, but you can also chew it by chewing tobacco or through snuff tobacco and chew that as well. There are three main chemically active components in tobacco. The first is tar, which causes a variety of cancers and also contributes to emphysema and other respiratory problems. Next up, you've got carbon monoxide, which restricts your oxygen-carrying capability of the blood and can mess with your heart. And then you've got nicotine, which is the substance believed to cause its dependency, reaches the heart and brain through the bloodstream within a few seconds of when you start smoking. In its pure state, it is a toxic poison and used in insecticides. There are a whole bunch of dangers of smoking tobaccos, but also chewing tobacco can also cause damage. In particular, snuff, if you chew one can of it, its harmful effects are about equal to that of 60 cigarettes. Recently, there was a lawsuit in which it was required that cigarette companies and other tobacco companies warn individuals on their packaging about all of the hazards of using tobacco. The use continues because of its popularity. In addition, I mentioned secondhand smoke earlier. Research indicates that if you breathe in smoke that has left a cigar or cigarette or pipe that someone else is smoking, they also have an increased risk of lung cancer, heart disease, and respiratory disorders. So basically, everything about smoking kind of sucks. When you smoke a cigarette, you inhale over 4,000 different chemicals. At least 1,000 of them are known to be dangerous chemicals. It is really bad. You can also develop a really bad addiction to nicotine. And yeah, so pretty much everything about tobacco is very dangerous, and pretty much everything about all drugs is dangerous. Remember, one of the techniques of educated guessing is to try and figure out what the agenda of the question is, and if you've got a question about drugs, remember that the agenda of the textbook is to convince you not to use them. And all things considered, that's a pretty good idea. That's all I've got for today. Thank you all so much for listening, and I'll see you tomorrow.